Here's what I think is going on with the L8 wave count with Bitcoin. I think you got in all likelihood the 5 minor waves done, or the 4 minor waves. Pardon me, 4 minor waves done, and I think you're in minor wave 5 right now, and we're carving out these smaller subwaves. But I think you have the one here from our 49,000 area, the 2, the 3, the 4, and I think you got minor wave 5 going on right now. Again, the pullback that I predicted, I think, is coming to a conclusion. I think Bitcoin's going higher. You're going to see this push higher, probably surrounding the extension of the tax cuts, the 2017 tax cuts. We got NVIDIA earnings next week. We'll see what happens with that. If we get a sell-off ahead of the earnings, and maybe we try to rebound. Or maybe some other catalyst. But again, I think you got a good shot at this trend line I'm talking about, and I've been talking about it in the last couple of updates. This is our log scaling. I think you got a good shot at trying to bounce in this area. Even if we don't go to that level, I think we're in a bottoming process. But I think, like I said, we could still come down here a little bit lower and again, test that gap area again, that gap fill area on IBIT. See that in this video, but again, this is what I think is going on right here. Now again, we had this low. I think this low's got a pretty good shot at holding. Again, this is our support zone. This is our low from the tariff sell-off low, and again, I'm looking for this trend line to possibly be tested and a bounce off of this area, and then to go up and to take out 109,000. You got these 5 minor waves, and I think that will complete intermediate wave 5. Intermediate wave 5. I think you completed intermediate wave 3 and 4 over here, and I think you're in this final intermediate wave 5 to complete the blow off top. It's unfolding in 5 minor waves, and it is likely that we are now in that minor wave 5 getting these smaller subwaves. And I think the S&P is doing the exact same thing. Go watch. I'll link it at the end of this video. Go watch my S&P video on the L8 wave count. And I present 4 possibilities. Wrong about the January low. And I'm going to say the same thing here that I said with the S&P. If I'm wrong about the January low and it doesn't hold, then you have really wave 4. You would have an A, B, and a C structure here that would give us the wave 4 right there. So if I'm wrong about that, we take out the January low, then maybe minor wave 4 isn't done yet. We're about to start minor wave 5, but my guess is that minor wave 4 is done. As I've said, I always like to tell you other possibilities. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think that we're going to bounce around this area, and I think that we are already in the minor wave 5. We're going to get the trend extension with wave 3 next, and I think it's going to go new all-time highs. Now, again, I think that if we bounce off this trend line, I think you can really get traction off our 100 period. Bitcoin follows a 100 period moving average. Bitcoin's not hard to understand. It comes with its own outline, the 100 period moving average. And again, we're about to test the trend line here, and I think you're going to get traction surrounding this 100 period moving average in the support zone. And then I think you're going to build momentum to come up and take out this line right here of resistance. Remember, I talked about this trend line at 108,000. I told you we were topping right there, going to get a pullback, and then 109,000, we hit it again. This is our log scaling. I think we're going to end up building momentum and clear that level and eventually move to this trend line right here, which I've talked about at great length and detail. I think you'll see a divergence with pring parameter develop there. You have this larger one developing already with the previous peak here in March, from March of 2024. I think you're going to get one more push higher, and then I think you're going to get this divergence here that's going to be this triple negative divergence with pring parameter, and then I think you're going to have your Bitcoin blow off top complete. 100 period, again, when we peaked out in 2021, you drop below it, you got rejection at it, rejection, tried to get above it here, it failed. You drop below it, and the bottom fell out of Bitcoin. Rejection, rejection, rejection. You bottomed out, you got your bullish divergence with pring parameter and other indicators. You got above the 100, you found support. Here you went sideways, you dropped below it, got back above it, dropped below it, you got above it again, and you went higher, and you found support here, here, and here. Finally, you broke it, and you, again, had that 33% corrective move. Bitcoin follows a 100 period moving average. When you're above it and dropping back below it, you're going sideways. Like here, when you're above it and holding above it, you're trending higher. When you're dropping below it and holding below it, you're trending lower. Bitcoin follows a 100 period moving average. Bitcoin is not hard to understand. Now, we have the RSI having peaked over here with the December peak, and we've seen it turn up. We tried to turn back up, and Bitcoin moved actually higher. It moved to 109,000, but it got topping tails there, and again, it turned back down. I still think you're going to see the RSI turn back up and get this divergence right here in the more recent price action as Bitcoin goes and slams up into this trend line, okay, and can take it towards 135,000 right now because we've gone nowhere. We have gone nowhere really since with the November ahead of the election there. We rallied, and then, you know, with it, we've gone nowhere. We've gone sideways when we didn't reach that upper channel line for several months. So again, it's likely we're still going to reach it. Good news. That's going to just take Bitcoin all that much higher. That's the good news about it all. We're taking our time reaching that upper boundary, but I think you're going to end up still getting this divergence right here, and then I think you're going to see Bitcoin top out, completing the blowout top. Officially, we don't have a divergence. So my trend line's moved on me a little bit because I zoomed in here, but we don't have a divergence. The RSI doesn't look at these shadows right here. We didn't move to it. We moved up on an intra-week basis above 109,000, but we didn't close there. So again, there is no divergence present with that second peak that we had at 109,000. I think you're still going to go higher and get that larger divergence on the RSI. And again, right below we have our 20-week moving average. If we go a little bit lower, as I've talked about, confluence of support and maybe hit the trend line, which I'm talking about in this video, well, you've got your 20-week moving average right here as well. So you've got a confluence of support in the weekly time frame. You've got a confluence of support in the daily time frame. I think Bitcoin is consolidating to get its next move higher, and I think it is coming, and I think it's going to be up at the channel line. Please support the channel with the link directly below that allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the charts, you like the indicators, let me know that by supporting the channel. If you could take a moment to do that, I'd appreciate it. I don't have any sponsors, don't want any sponsors. They contact me all the time. I turn them down. These exchanges that want to get you all leveraged up to wipe you out. It's just a lot of shady deals on the internet. I don't want any part of it, but I need to hear from you in order to make it work. If you like this information, if you want this information, then support the channel. I just ask that you do what you can to help out. Follow the link below to take you to a secured site, and you can donate any amount you want or make it a recurring donation. If you do that, I thank you for considering that. Don't lose sight of the big picture. Again, we're getting all this choppiness. We're going sideways. Eventually, the consolidation is likely going to lead higher, okay, and complete the blow-off top. I think we're about to get the final phase here, that we've already entered it because I believe minor wave 5 has started. We're in the final phase of the blow-off top, and I think we're going to rally, again, maybe with the tax cuts, maybe with some other news, favorable for Bitcoin, but then I think Bitcoin's going to peak, and again, Bitcoin could peak before altcoins, and I'll talk about that. I didn't have time last time, and I don't have time this time because I'm talking about bottoming process, but again, Bitcoin's likely going to peak, and then maybe later after that, possibly 4 or 6 weeks later, we can see altcoins peak after Bitcoin. That's what's happened in the past. Sometimes they peak together. The 2021 top peaked together, but the first 2021 top they didn't, and in 2017 they didn't. I'll talk more about that hopefully in my next video or two. I'll try to take time to show you that. Bitcoin can rally. I think it's going to stall at this trend line right here, this channel, and we got some major stiff resistance here. I think you're going to begin to price in that recession. And again, Bitcoin's never really been through a real recession. We had a very mild recession that was papered over by the Fed QE 2.0 and 5 trillion in stimulus checks. About to go into a real recession that is going to be painful. The stock market's going to enter a bear market, and Bitcoin going to move down with it, people will be surprised because the conventional wisdom is, oh, the Fed's going to just not let it happen. They're just going to QE. But this time, people are going to be shocked. The stock market peaks and Bitcoin peaks, and we get a dramatic drop with them. The Fed will do emergency cuts, and it'll only be a counter trend. Going to happen. Bitcoin is not going to dodge the recession. Bitcoin is not recession proof. And during the recession, it's probably going by 2026, it will likely take out the low from 2022. They're at 15,000. It'll probably move just beyond that, where there's a major support level. It'll likely give us an ABC move to the downside. Again, don't lose sight of the seasonality. Again, we have the volatility in January, February. You're likely going to see the rally in March, maybe on into early April. And then I think you're going to peak. And again, I pointed out over the last 4 years, we've had sell-offs from April to September, and you've had a peak in either late March or early April. And again, April to September, the bottom falls out of Bitcoin. And here you went sideways. You had two important sell-offs there. Here you had a 33% drop here. You peaked in late March there. And again, this April to September and possibly a late March peak, or possibly into April. But I think the seasonality is likely going to continue. I think you're going to get a pop on Bitcoin, but then I think it's going to top out as we go into April and September, and I think you're going to see this kind of volatility. So don't lose sight of the big picture. Well, I think Bitcoin's going higher. I think it's going to be followed by a major top, and when it happens, nobody's going to believe that it's a major top. They didn't believe it was a top back over here in 2021. Okay, it is the Saturday session for Bitcoin, and in my last video I talked about, I titled it, is it a breakout or a fake out? I told you what to be watching for. We get above the 20-week or 20-period moving average, 20-day moving average here in the daily time frame, stay above it. We did not. We got above it, and we dropped right back below it, getting rejection at our 50-period moving average. Here on Bitcoin. We had a rally, and this rally, we got a bottoming tail right here. I warned you before we got that bottoming tail that we were moving down to the support area, and we very well could test it again and even take out this low. Again, I've talked about the support zone with this low right here, this low right here. I've talked about the trend line right here, and I've talked about hitting the lower boundary, the bull flag. We did break out of, or the bullish falling wedge. We did break out of the bullish falling wedge, and it is now possibly evolving into a bull flag, back-to-back bull flags. Again, this is still a very important area. Now, again, I continue to warn. I believe Bitcoin is in a bottoming process. Yes, I think Bitcoin's going to go make new highs. Yes, I think it's going to head towards my trend line, the target level. The good news is the longer we do this, the longer we have the chop and slop, the longer this takes, the higher Bitcoin's going to go, because the longer you take to reach my trend line, the higher Bitcoin will go. And so, again, that's the good news. But again, patience is a virtue. So again, I think that the buyers continue to come in here, and I think we saw that right here, but I still think that we could backtest this level, and you may even take it out, but you could bottom early next week. That's certainly possible if we try to take out this low. And again, like I said, listen carefully. We've already reached this low over here. We've already come back and tested this low from January, where I called the bottom that day, and again, called the day of the top here, because I have good indicators. Even called the day of the December top over here. Again, the trend lines. And you can make some amazing calls if you just pay attention to some of these trend lines. We reversed off a trend line right here. I told you we were moving towards the trend line right there. And we bounced off of it right there with our linear scaling. And told you we were going to come back to the January low for a test. And we did. And again, it's probably a bottom right here. We're probably going to try to bottom out just above that, or maybe just below it. But again, I think you got a pretty good shot of bottoming out just above it. I always like to tell you what I think. Regardless, I think that the support zone right here is likely to hold right in this area. And let me draw that a little better there. And I've circled this area because, again, I think we could back test. We can back test here a little bit more. We can even get a higher low above this low right here. But I told you again, this is the area that I think the buyers are in. I think the buyers step up to the plate in this area, and then I think we finish this thing. Now we have another trend line. If we back test this one, now we have another trend line to be watching. So right now we have a failed breakout at this point above our 20 period moving average. So again, got to get back above that 20 period moving average. The 10 could not get back above the 20 period. So again, do we have more work to be done? You know, you get the bottoming tails. We had one here. We had one here. You know, a couple over here. Had it here, and all back over here, as I've talked about. If we don't assume that we have a larger bull flag now, if we just say, okay, well, we just broke out of the bullish falling wedge and we're in backtest mode now, then again, the same area comes into play. I talked about the buyer interest over here. What happened? Buyers came in. Okay, again, that's near the 78.6 Fibonacci that we hit. We moved just beyond it. Maybe we go down just a little bit lower and backtest here and test this area again to complete the bottoming process. Over here, I've marked. Look at all this interest. Let me just zoom out here so you can see it. Look at all the interest over here. Again, at this horizontal support area, you've got a lot of interest. Sometimes you don't quite reach it. Other times you do. And this is where we had our January bottom. This is where we had our higher low right here. So again, I think that you got a good shot that Bitcoin is in a bottoming process. And then I think it's off to the races. But you very well could be in backtest mode of a bull flag here. And again, we may see this low from a few days ago tested, or even attempted to be taken out, to go back and test the support zone. Again, this low here, which was our tariff sell-off low, and the low here, the January low. So again, that's a support zone. I think it's going to hold, and then I think Bitcoin's going to eventually go up and take out 109,000 here, the resistance zone, 109, 108,000 over here, and start clearing some of this resistance. Now, we still have the bearish arrangement of the moving averages. The 10 and 20 are still below the 50. Again, you're getting this choppiness. You're getting the crossover of the 10 and 20. They drop below the 50, then they get back above it. They drop back below it. And really, that's just showing that we're just in this sideways range. And again, I've talked about all the support down here with our VWAP support and horizontal support. As I'm making the video here on Saturday, Bitcoin is up about 0.25%. It's up about $254. Here is the VWAP support, and we're turning right now off VWAP resistance. But let's look at this horizontal support area. We've had this horizontal support, and I've talked about all the VWAP support, and the ones that we've been bouncing off of have really been from the breakout point here. Look at the breakout point of our bull flag right here. We had the breakout right here, and from that peak right there, and from that low right there, we've had these support areas. And then you got this other line right here that goes back to the low just before that. That's where we bounced off our 100 period moving average in the daily time frame, which Bitcoin follows the 100 period. And we're testing it right now as well. So I think you're going to bottom around this area. But pretty interesting that, again, we've risen up, bounced off VWAP support. We're stowing at the VWAP resistance. Let me just bring this up area close up here for you. I talked about if this area does break, there's not much in the way of support right here. So again, I told you I thought that we were going to hold because I believe that we're in minor wave 4 and essentially starting minor wave 5 now here, as I've been talking about. Here's a horizontal support right here, the blue. Here's a resistance up here, and here's our high up here at 109,000. Now, if we take the peak here and we take the peak over here and we have the VWAP anchored there, which is volume weighted average price, you're getting some resistance over here, and then we take the low over here and you got more resistance. It's a confluence of resistance there, and that's where we're turning down off of. So is there more work to be done here? And that's what I talked about in my last update. And I think that's the case. The breakout kind of failed. We tried to get above the 20 period moving average in the daily time frame, and we couldn't hold above it. Probably more work to be done. So again, watching the support zone here, and look at this. It's in the lower end of the support, horizontal support here is our support zone. And then we have this, again, this other VWAP support right here from the 100 period moving average, our previous test of that. So again, just some levels I'm looking at right here. But, and again, if we come back a little bit lower than this level, if we say come back right here, but still hold above the support zone, then you're going to be, even breach it slightly, you're going to be trying to bounce off of that level right there. Now I got to show you this 4-hour chart of Bitcoin. I've been talking about this quite a bit, and the 60-minute chart of IBIT. The reason why I told you I thought we were going to go lower is to fill that gap on IBIT from the inflation data in January, and we did. I still think we can revisit that area. But take a look at this. Again, we still have our 50 below the 200 period here in the 4-hour time frame. But we rallied up. We went a little bit lower. I told you that that was going to happen. We had that happen. I told you we could go lower, or we can even go deeper into that support zone. And we still may do it. But we had the breakout of this trend line, and we formed a little rising wedge. Do you see what I'm talking about here? The rising wedge right there into the 200 period moving average. And we went up and we hit the upper boundary, and then we turned. And we formed some divergences on smaller time frames. So I'm going to show you these smaller time frames. But this is our 4-hour chart right here. And again, going to be watching. Do we now get a back test that gives us a higher low, or do we come back? And I've marked this area. We're testing that area right now. But do we end up going deeper? And again, I am looking for a bottom, but do we go deeper into this area, maybe closer to this trend line? Or again, look at the upper boundary of our previous bull flag over here. Do we have another bull flag here? And we come back into this area down in here into that support zone. Do you see the support zone right there? So this is the area, I've highlighted it, that I'm really paying attention to, potentially back testing the breakout of a bullish falling wedge, or again, has this now evolved into a larger bull flag, another one, and we just come back down in here into the lower boundary of that, and the previous upper boundary, which again, the previous upper boundary of the bull flag that we had over here. I talked about, again, there was all this talk of a head and shoulders. I told you it was a fake pattern, and I was right, and we had that breakout, but have been making some amazing calls with these divergences right here. Do we end up getting one? If I extend this out, you can see right here, we had a kind of a divergence develop here that was kind of sloppy a little bit. We exclude the shadows here. The RSI doesn't look at that. And we moved slightly lower there, giving us this rising wedge right here. Are we building upon that now? Or do we end up, getting a larger divergence where we come down into this area somewhere? Or again, try to go into the support zone. So just some things I'm looking at. Look, I'm looking for a bottom in this area. We had that low earlier in the week. Hey, that's it. But again, there still might be more work to be done. Regardless, I don't think you're going to take out the January low. As I've said, I think that low is going to likely hold. There's still the possibility of a larger minor wave 4, where you take out that level. I talked about that the previous week. I talked about the scenario where you have this larger wave 4 that you end up trying to take this level out ever so slightly, and then you bottom. So I talked about that scenario as well. Maybe we'll take a look at that if we have some time. With this rising wedge, I'm going to show you this area right now. I'm going to show you this area on the hourly chart, maybe the 30-minute chart here. We'll take a look at that. But look at this rising wedge going right into 200 here, and then coming back down and dropping back below the 50. Let's look at that on the hourly and the 30-minute chart. Let's take a look. A nice looking divergence on the MACD. Again, we rallied up, but we formed this rising wedge looking pattern, and then we saw a little pop the Friday session, but then it was followed by a drop, and now we're struggling here at the moving average, the 200 period moving average. Here it is on the 60-minute chart, and again, beautiful rising wedge, the pop higher, and then the breakdown. And notice this, look at the RSI. This is beautiful in the 60-minute time frame. When we bottomed out on Tuesday, we got a bottoming tail here on the hourly chart. Do you see the hammer? You see the little hammer right there? That's a bottoming tail. We bottomed out. We got into positive territory there on the RSI above 50. And look at this. We had this rising wedge. We moved from this 93,000 area all the way up here to 99,000, just under the 100,000 area. And then we formed this rising wedge. But look at the RSI. It popped above 50, stayed above it, became overbought. No diversions here. We did have it on the MACD here in the 60-minute time frame, but not on the RSI. And then we dropped below 50 and we broke the trend line. And again, we're probably going to see a diversions or multiple point diversions here. And then I think you probably bottom in the area that I've been talking about. But again, look at that beautiful immediate waterfall type of a sell-off there. Look at that. And then a rebound back up now. So again, we'll be watching to see if a divergence develops. But again, I think you're likely going to see lower levels. And maybe you got a shot at a bottom Monday or Tuesday with Bitcoin. But I am looking for a bottoming process. And again, the MACD diversions played out. We got a bullish cross giving us this rebound, but we're in negative territory. So we'll be watching to see. We now make a move to try to take this low out, or do we try to set up a higher low above it? And again, that was Tuesday's low. I told you as we started the week off, we could see a bottom this week here that we're in right now. Because we didn't go lower than that, we still might take it out with this low right here as we make a move to take out that low, which I think is still very, very possible. I talked about these gaps on IBIT, the Bitcoin ETF. This is the IBIT 60-minute chart over here. And I talked about these gaps. We gapped higher, but again, you got that same rising wedge here on the Bitcoin ETF on IBIT. And it broke down, came back and filled the second gap. Now we're moving back to fill this first gap. And again, could we take it out and come back and again go beyond our gap fill? Remember, I talked about one reason why I told you we were going to sell off over here is because I thought we had filled this gap at 53.22 on the IBIT ETF, and we did that ever so slightly. But could we take it out a little bit more and bottom out, but still not take out the January 13th low? I think that's very, very possible. Again, looking for a bottom here, but again, Bitcoin had the breakout and is backtesting. Look at IBIT. IBIT broke out of its declining trend line here and threw right back into the trading range. You do have a possible now trend line here if I exclude some shadows here, but again, could we be forming another bull flag, move to the lower end of this trend line right here? I think that's very possible that IBIT does that, going down into this 52, high 51, maybe mid 51, high 51, or on into the 52 area there, and again still hold above the January low. So I think that's very, very possible. But I think you can see a bottom here, and I have an L8 wave count with the S&P 500 that would give us a little bit of volatility, but then we'd rally. Now we're going to get NVIDIA earnings next week on Wednesday. Could that produce a bottom on the S&P 500? Stock market try to bottom out? Could be. Go watch my L8 wave count. I have 4 scenarios on the S&P, and I'll link it at the end of this one. But it's kind of interesting, shorter video for me. So you might want to check that out. Again, I do think that multiple point divergences have formed here. Could we get another reference point right here on the RSI? I think that's very possible. Again, if we drop quickly, Monday or Tuesday or something, do we get another bottoming tail that looks like this? You see what I'm saying? Are there buyers in this area? I think that's likely. Again, I continue to believe that we're going to get a bottom around this gap fill area, and that's why I told you I thought we'd move to it, and we did briefly, but then we gapped up. Do we test this area a little bit more? I think we will possibly do that. I think you got a good shot of it happening. Look at the MACD, and again, look at the stochastic. It's now turning towards oversold area. The oversold area, but look at the MACD. We had this bullish divergence give us this rising wedge back up to the 200 here on the 60-minute chart. Now we've dropped back below the 50. Do we come down here and get another reference point early on Monday, Tuesday, early on next week, and see a bottom develop with the IBIT ETF? I think that is very, very, very possible. I wanted to show you that 60-minute chart because, again, it is this gap that is very important to me that I think we're filling it. I think we just did. I think that maybe there might be a little bit more work to be done. That's why I'm saying Bitcoin might go a little bit lower, but then bottom out. Now, again, I predicted back on January 20th on Inauguration Day when Bitcoin peaked that we're going to get a pullback. And I think it's coming to a conclusion, as I said. And because it didn't finish, or maybe it didn't finish last week here, maybe it finishes this coming next week here for IBIT and for Bitcoin. Live it, love it, learn it. Going back to the Bitcoin 4-hour chart, these divergences have allowed us to make some amazing calls, calling the top over here, calling the bottom over here in January. And again, we hit trend lines of resistance at both of those levels. And I talked about moving to the trend lines in both cases and rising up to the one in the weekly, rising or falling back to the one in the daily. Predicted that rally. Everybody's saying head and shoulders, and this was the right shoulder, and I said it's a fake pattern. You got a bull flag. And again, I was correct. We had the big rally up. We went up about 23, well, almost 24%. I think, I think it was almost 23 or 24, whatever it was, percent. We peaked on Inauguration Day. We had that one-day reversal, and I told you Bitcoin's going to pull back and backtest. We did do that. So we're getting the back test and the pullback that I've been talking about. And again, death cross. So again, we've got more work to be done here. And again, we're watching for clues. But again, I'm just looking at this area. I think the case can be made, again, to go closer to that support zone, to test the low over here, to test the low over here. So watching. But I think that once we bottom out, bottoming process completes, I think Bitcoin is going to skyrocket higher because I think you've got possibly another reference point of a divergence that could be under construction here. If we come back into this area, or into the support zone, but come back just above it or into it, if we see this bullish divergence, multiple point bullish divergence begin to try to develop here on the Bitcoin 4-hour chart. We rallied up almost 23%. That's what it was after dropping 17, almost 18% there. Look, another thing is not only do we have this horizontal support here again, and the upper boundary of the bullish flag, the bull flag there, and you've got different areas of support here. I think you have a confluence of support. But this is an important trend line to me right here, this trend line right here. And if we go down, I think we could still hit it. And this trend line right here, this trend line's from the 52,000 low, that higher low that's set up at Bitcoin's average price right there. We got back above our 100 period, the pink line. And again, we're now at that area again. So again, we're at a confluence of support. So just going back to this chart for a moment, again, talking about this trend line, this is our log scaling. Remember, it was the linear trend line right here that I predicted this bottom and bounce. I told you we were moving back towards it. And we've made some absolutely amazing calls. Told you that top right there, the day of the top with that trend line we hit in the weekly time frame. Told you we were going to bounce off horizontal support here. Told you to be watching for a lower high here. I told you we can get a higher low, and that'd be the end of it if we had an ABC move here. But I told you we can go down and hit the trend line and bounce off of it, which we did. That would be the bottom. And it was, and that was our January bottom. I think the January bottom here is going to hold, but look at where you're coming in. Look at where you're coming in. If you come down here and test our low from earlier in the week, was Tuesday's low, this bottoming tail right here. If you come back down in this area, right in here, somewhere right in here, you've got this rising trend line. You've got this trend line over here. So again, do we see another test of the support zone? And again, I think that's very possible. People are starting to get bearish now. People are getting discouraged. Bulls are getting frustrated. And so we could see a bottom develop in this area. And we're seeing the huge outflows with the Bitcoin ETF. And that's usually where bottoms develop. Inflows are where the tops develop. You know, over here you get the massive inflows at the tops. We're seeing the outflows take place as we've had this sell-off here.